Well, welcome back to Conflict of Interest. We're talking today about petrol prices and where they're heading and if they're ever going to come south again rather than going north. And our guest today is Adam Grubb, who is the founder and now the Australian editor for Energy Bulletin, which is an international publication which you can get online, energybulletin.net. Adam, we were talking before, Peter and I were talking before about peak oil, which is starting to creep into the popular vernacular now. You know, it's the man on the street talk.
I wasn't talking about it. I've never heard of it.
Well, we were.
Is it an oil company? Is it like Shell Oil? Or?
No, we did raise it. Hang on, let's find out what it is. What is peak oil?
Right. Well, the naive idea about oil is that one day it will. Well, the extreme naive idea is that it's an infinite resource. We can keep using it forever. In fact, that's kind of been the foundation of a lot of our economic planning. However, companies like BP will say there's 40 years of oil left, and it sort of creates the impression that we'll just use it fine. It'll be the same amount year on year, and then suddenly it'll be gone. Right. But in fact, it doesn't work like that when you're dealing with the geological idiosyncrasies of how oil production actually works. It tends to follow a bell-shaped curve of production.
Right.
So we've been on an incline of oil production since the beginning of the oil age, over 100 years ago. And we're now reaching this apex. And
so have we reached the apex, or we are reaching it? In 2008, have we reached the apex?
Does a bell curve have an apex?
Well, there's a peak. There's a sort of peak across the top.
But what we don't expect is it for suddenly to disappear. So we're probably looking from around about this point onwards.
It's going to diminish in supply.
That's right. So it's really an era of...
Can I say this in English? Yeah. As we go along the next few years, there's going to be less oil.
Yes.
There you are.
That's all there is. Yeah. But it'll be a year-on-year thing.
But is this view?
Oil and bell curves?
Well, because peak oil is a convenient. Hang on, it's a convenient. So it was a movement that was started a few years ago to try and say, look, actually, we won't have this resource forever. But one of the things I want to ask you is peak oil now commonly accepted across oil companies? Are there peak oil skeptics like there are climate change skeptics?
The phrase is used, except I don't think there's really anybody of any credibility which actually believes that oil's never going to peak. Sometimes the distinction is really when.
Yeah.
So if oil gets to, what do you think this CSIRO paper, where it's talking about possibility of oil peaking at $8 a litre at the pump in 10 years' time? Is that possible?
So the Future Fuels Forum came out with a paper just very recently in the last few days, which is making that prediction.
But it's a responsible organisation, isn't it?
Of course, yes. Yeah, and they were working with the oil industry, with General Motors, and with scientists and experts from the Australian Association for the Study of Peak Oil.
But I thought the CSIRO had something to do with it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, they coordinated it.
Okay, and aren't they the same people who the government's relying on for the prediction of global warming? Same people.
Well, they're one of the bodies.
Yeah,
listen, $8. They said an $8 oil price. That just seems to me to be extraordinary per litre. And they were saying it by 2018. I mean, that just
it's only 10 years.
Well, one of the things I want to bring up is the work of Daniel Yergin, who's regarded as one of the sort of global gurus on oil. He says in the US, for example, Adam. He says in recent testimony to the US Congress, he said it as recently as I think June, that we've reached peak demand. In other words, you're going to get all these efficiencies in cars now. You're going to see
less oil will make cars more efficient.
No, there'll be less oil used by cars. There'll be, cars won't need.
People won't be able to afford to have
cars.
Hang on,
cars will not need as much oil. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, Jürgen, I should preface by saying is the last. If you would apply peak oil skeptic to anybody, like he's one that pushes it out as far as possible, and year on year he's making these predictions that oil's going to go down, and some peak oil proponents have even declared certain days Daniel Yergin Day whenever the price doubles his last prediction.
Right.
So he's not credible like most of these statistics you cite. But at $8 a litre, my Holden Commodore is going to cost $600 to fill the tank.
What's going to happen in society? Let's say we go to $5. Halfway. Halfway.
Trebles what it is.
Let's say we go to $5 in Australia. Let's say we're at $5 by 2012, 2013, and that's then a common price. What's that mean for Australian society in just everyday society?
Well, it's not a completely implausible scenario, given that many people would argue that oil is undervalued at the moment.
Okay, so what's it mean for Australia?
A small glass, just 100 mil of oil contains enough energy to pull a small car up to the top of the Eiffel Tower.
Wow.
There's enough energy in a litre of oil. It's the equivalent of hard work of...
It's almost vertical.
Yeah. This is not a common sense. He's not applying common sense here, Peter. It's just a theoretical possibility.
But
listen, Adam, what I want to know is if petrol's at $5, what does that mean for the average family? Say living out on the quarter acre block. What does that mean?
Well, it means a very hard time for those families. I mean, especially in the McMansion suburbs where people are dependent on long distance travel in cars.
Now look, let's take 2 points. One is, if it's going to be at that price, a large number of people won't have cars because they can't afford to run them.
Is that right?
I agree with that.
And consequently, public transport is going to have to improve enormously so the population can get to work.
Yeah.
But
that requires massive investments and a long lead time.
Investments now.
There was a report commissioned by the US Department of Energy, the Robert Hirsch report, which was a risk assessment of peak oil, and he was just given that brief. When peak oil occurs, what will be the implications? And he said, without at least a decade, and he was really talking about 2 decades, of emergency crash mitigation programs, so $1 trillion a year, all aspects of
public transport.
Well, I can tell you, I can guarantee you something. We will have the Victorian Wiki, or Mickey, that will, in 10 years' time, that'll just be beginning. So at least we'll have a ticketing system for public transport in 10 years' time.
But isn't one of the problems
it's all aspects of the economy, because oil is important in food production, it's imported in medicines, plastics.
Two things. Firstly, and I think we're agreed, public transport is going to have to...
Yeah, I agree.
Take up this risk enormously, and I don't think it's even being considered at the moment. And the other one is the cost of goods, because in a country as big as this, goods are transported all over the country. That requires fuel. Now, that's going to add enormously to the cost of food and all other goods and services.
Well, you've painted a scenario recently where you say in what you call the McMansion suburbs, and the outer suburbs of Melbourne, for example, where people will literally have to leave their homes because they won't afford to live there, and they'll just become sort of ghetto areas. Is that right?
Well, I'm not predicting the future so far as commenting on what's already happening in the US, more because of the subprime mortgage fallout.
They are walking away in the US because they've got negative equity.
At $5 a litre, we're starting to see some major services starting to fall apart. We're starting to see some visible signs of decay. This is quite a broad-reaching implications.
Where are those people going to go? I mean, we're going to be putting more pressure on the cities.
Well, actually,
the city areas.
I mean, the component of energy that goes into, if we do a pie chart of people's energy use, building is actually quite huge. And one way of reducing our energy use and ecological impact is to get more homeless people, or to cram more people in together. So living with more family, and that's how people have lived.
People are homeless and on the street. They don't need the energy for houses. They don't need public transport.
Yeah, but that's not a socially acceptable solution.
But something Mr. Rudd may have to do. I mean, what I'm concerned about is what Rudd's going to do about this, even though you say it's not his problem.
Well, what do you say about reduction?
Can Rudd? He's got 2.5 years to go. Will he be able to completely fuck the economy in that time, or will he need another term? That's the question, isn't it?
The governments all around the world are dealing with this oil price.
But we
can't call it a spike because we're really looking at a long-term trend.
We're not dealing with it.
And it's an unprecedented challenge for all the world's economies because we're actually looking at an era. It could be the end of growth. Like without energy, literally nothing happens.
Well, do you have faith that we're going to have to wind up in a minute, so just let me ask you the difficult one. Do you have faith that Mr. Rudd's government is looking at this and will be able to fix it? Do you have faith?
I'm sadly disappointed that at least 11 members of the Australian Association for the Study of Peak Oil, who worked in conjunction with the CSIRO on the report that you mentioned, had their applications rejected to the 2020 summit.
Really? Interesting.
Did you get invited?
I didn't get invited. Did you get invited? Did you get invited, Adam?
I didn't get invited.
None of us got invited in this room, which makes us all really good blokes.
But guys, that's all we have for the moment. We have to go to a break, and Adam Grubb, I'd like to thank you. And it's a fantastic topic. I'm sure we'll be coming back to this.
We sure will.
Thank you.